Hi guys, it's another top 5 video, this time on the top 5 personal favourite remotes. This one is completely my personal opinion and it's 50% REMs I think are actually good and 50% I love this and I will defend it. Really it's the humans will pack bond with anything the video. Don't take this too seriously and let me know if you agree or have your own favourite REM that I missed out on. So number 5 is the Tractor Mule. It's not a good profile, to be honest. It sucks as an Ariadne S3 bot, but if you look at it similarly to other baggage bots, it's not that bad, as it can even pull some Silhouette 3 bot use cases. The Mule's key features is that it's an availability to 5-point regular order, which is really helpful. It's got some other nice features too in baggage, guided -6 for some reason. I'm not sure why, but maybe an old veteran can explain that one to me. It also has the standard REM press, courage and immunity shocks that most, if not all, remotes get. Its stats are not great with BS 10, Fizz 9 and Whip 12, although it's ARM too, so that's pretty decent I guess. Now the odd bit. It has two BS guided profiles. The Katyushka, a double action missile launcher template weapon with rifle range bands, or the Uragan, which is a similarly ranged weapon with AP plus shot on one profile with damage 15 and then another profile that has damage 14 and a template. But it's also burst 3 and a total reaction bot. Remember, these are rifle range bands, not combi bands, so the +3 between 8 and 16 and on BS 10, which means they're not great, but they certainly exist. For ITS 14, there is the Forward Observer profile, which exists just for the Tachimoto special rule, which for some people is getting results. I'll need to give it a go, and maybe in that Chernobog list I talked about in my last video. Go check that out in the card. So why is this my number 5 over our regular Silhouette 4 Evo baggage bot? Well, I mean, like, look at the model. It's a mini tank loaded up with the squad bags and a little sensor ball that I'm really glad they brought back on the Chernobog. It's also holding old but largely holding up multiple launch rocket systems. To be honest, the sculpts could do with a rework. Essentially with the amount of metal they use, they both cost as much as a tag. Anyway, the reason I like them is that they have a lot of character. Like, I can see them being named by the troops they are serving with, like everything else in the army. I can imagine the squad loving or loathing these things, giving them names like Eeyore or Sparky or something as it supports them in the marshes and forests of Dawn. They're such an Ariadne thing, and I think it fits them perfectly. Its design tells a story of making do, of the ruggedness of Ariadne. I love them. They're like a little loyal Labrador or pack mule, funnily enough. And that's why they're my number 5, because they look like they do their job and bring such character to the role while fitting in perfectly to the sectorial. So the Garuda is my number 4 because I think drop robots are really neat. I love Silhouette 2, 3 remotes and remote presence strippers. It's a unique, fun design space that you can go wild in. So the Garuda is sort of a discount paracommando, which is really good. It loses Whip 14 but gains REM press, shock immunity and combat jump, so it can drop anywhere on the table on 11s. It's a pretty cheap unit with a 19-point boarding shotgun to drop in, or a 25-point Spitfire to do the same on BS 12, the ability to get marksmanship and min -3. That's a seriously nice little turn 2 threat piece, but the profile is not why I love the model. No, it's the design itself. Aleph has a bit of a Super Sentai Power Ranger vibe, and I think the Garuda is one of the peaks of this design. This model is so much like a Megazord and I love it. The new models and dossier look great and I love the wings. I know the Garuda's name is based on the bird mount of Vishnu, so the wings fit perfectly. The big cylinder being a massive jump jet is perfect, and while Aleph could have made it smaller, I'm glad they didn't because it fits with the overall model. The arms and legs are long and lanky. I dig that. It's humanoid but not human, which makes perfect sense for an Aleph trooper. The big circular knees are very, I want to say some mecha anime, but I'm not that much of a weeb to know which one, but I've definitely seen the design somewhere before. The head is kind of like Farah from Overwatch in that it's very hawkish, which makes perfect sense. It's a paratrooper named after a bird or winged deity. I have noticed looking at the model, it's a very tall Silhouette 2 model, which I think adds to the unspoken terror of Aleph units. Imagine you're trying to defend an AI strike force, and then this thing about 6 to 7 foot tall just drops down, lands near your friends, puts 2 slugs into their chest, and towers over you emotionlessly. Horrifying. Anyway, I love the Garuda and its model, and if I run more airborne deployment troopers, I'm going to grab one to use it. So the number 3 is sensor bots, or well, really just the Pathfinder, because I shill for Pano. Why these guys? Well, ITS 14 made them absolutely correct and I love it, but at the same time I liked them before. The real reason is I like fast units that get the job done. It's perfect Infinity Fantasy, and these guys are 6'4", small quad bike size unit objective grabbers, which is pretty bang on for what I want. I also love the design. I love Oxbots, but if Oxbots were mini drone bots and the Armbots big drone bots, I'd also be very happy with that change. If I ever get into 3D modelling, I might totally do that. Anyway, I like the idea of them scuttling along as fast as motorbikes or tags and then using their little manipulators to grab a supply box and then sculling away like a crab that's just been given a juicy morsel. I think it's personally the armoured legs. I like the torso. I really dig that you can see the elements of the older sculpts like the Billeteer, Peacemaker and Oxbox in the drone bot's design. The stats though, like a lot of units I like, are the reason I like them. As previously mentioned, it's fast at 6'4", but it's only BS11 with a rifle, usually a combi, a flash pulse, whip 13 and spec ops. It is a sensor bot, so it has a sensor skill which is beyond useful for dealing with camo and hidden deployment. Forward observer in case you want to mark something at range, or the repeater to let a hacker do it for them. It has triangulated fire, which is a bit of a niche skill, but it's always worth having just in case. I've used this to take out a Gualo at long ranges to keep their head down, or they're gonna get blasted. Burst 3 on 9s is still far better than on 6s or 3s. Key thing to know about triangulated fire is that it's a long skill, so it requires a bit of positioning to set up, but once you're there, it's best used when you have more than -3 in mods. I'm really jealous of the Rafik though, because it gets a Red Fury version for Burst 4, and I would love to steal that and use that in one of the armies I play. Design and stats aside, I love to fit them in my list when I have 15 points to spare as a sort of tertiary objective grabbers, and being short means that they can usually hide from AROs and move up the board a little bit easier. I can help project my hackers as well in MO, helping offset my lack of pictures. No one wants to fight Pano when you're spotlit by an order sergeant. I love the drone bot and I just wish I could slot him into a link or two in military orders. Right, so we're moving a little from units that I love the looks, stats and concept of to a little more stats, concept and then looks. So my number 2 is the Vostok, and it is still a lovely looking unit. In fact, I'm using it for my Silhouette 4 assault bots. Painted it blue with anti-nomad decals to really rub it in. But that's not why I like it. The stats in this bad boy are really good, and I'll get to them in a second, but the concept first. What is the concept for the Vostok? Its logo is a shark, and the shortest way to put it is that it's a bloody tank. It's a Silhouette 4, so it's probably the size of a small car. Arm 3, BTS 6, which is basically bouncing rifle fire in cover. Then it's also got min-6 because Nomads stole a Billeteer or something, and it got into structure 2. So far, it's basically a really good Pano using heavy infantry, but a remote, which is kind of impressive. So, it's a hard to hit and hard to put down with Rem Press. We're not done yet, it's got climbing plus. So not only is it a tank, it's a climbing tank, and yet we're still not done. It has immunity AP, which means Nomads gave it some like diamond armor or ERA or something. So yeah, Breaker sucks against it, and in general small arms fire is going to have a really tough time. Again, all this on a large Rem. Do you know what else has like a similar setup? Surats, the Monkey Oni Vikings. So yeah, the Vostok is essentially the tankiest Arm 3 model you can get outside of something that's total immune and can take cover. You'll need to do 4 wounds to kill it outright, or Nomads will bring it back with some really solid engineers, and it ignores AP, so no cheats. Not only that, is it's min-6, which means you'll need some visors and multi-save ammo to kill it, which is a pain. So with all the stats, it's just good at its job at being a mobile Nomad battle bot, and I love it. We should talk about the design of the model, because it's not a bad looking model either. Starting at the bottom, the legs look great for a Rem, with the sort of omnidirectional tread that probably just means it strafes away rather than turns around like those forklifts with the weird wheels you can get. It probably also explains why it can just glide up walls, apparently. The legs are pretty chunky, which makes sense given it is ARM 3 BTS 6. And when we move up to the head, it looks great, and lore-wise, the program is sponsored by some Tunguska Bank, which shows when it shares a head with the Salamander Squad, and those cool little blue lights. The armoured body and chassis slope kinda nicely, like a tank. It has lots of little ports and armoured plates, as gubbins to break up some flat spaces. Finally, we have on its right side, which is what I assume the thermo-optic camo generator to be, and possibly the repeater housing, which is a really nice addition. Then, letting it down is the gun. The Nomad Mark 12 is a really lazy gun design, where all the other Nomad guns look so much better. I would have replaced this with a Pano HMG or Spitfire if I could even bother to flip the connection points. Overall, I love the Vostok's design and was really happy to get one and paint it panel blue, and I'm looking forward to using it more in military orders and Tunguska. I've been a bit tighter on my honourable mention since the heavy infantry video, but I'm sorry, we really needed one for Oxbots. They're not really on this list because they're a peripheral, which is a bit of a shame. I really love the concept of Oxbots, little helper bots to move up the board and just flamer people, which is really neat. It's like a Roomba with a flamethrower, and probably the unit in this list I think most fits the ideas of humans pack bonding with anything. I wish we got more of them, which is half the reason I made that equipment list video where I talked about assignable Oxbots. Go watch that. I love how the fluff is so very Pan-Oceania. You train some specialists up to do a job, and then you make a robot do the heavy lifting. Nomads and Pan-Oceania have two very similar yet different approaches to REMs, and it shows. Nomads leverage REMs to augment and expand their limited military force with Vostoks and puppets, but Pan-Oceania uses REMs to further specialise and support its massive military force with Bulleteers, Peacemakers, Pathfinders and Oxbots. That last one found on assault troops, be it heavy infantry, light infantry, tags, or hell, even other remotes. The Oxbot is the disposable piece to carry equipment and weapons to essentially protect and aggressively defend its owner. And I'm not gonna lie, if I was in Pano, I'd love an Oxbot to watch my back. So the model design, because the stats are really basic. They either get a light shotgun and an eclipse launcher, which is pretty unique, or a flamethrower and a special skill. Not a lot to discuss there, but remember how earlier I was saying Pano has a unified design with the Oxbot, drone bots and arm bots? Yeah, well, you can kind of see it here with the old drone bots and Oxbots. It seems they share some sort of head torso with the Oxbot, sitting on top of an omnidirectional wheel, which is a really cool design and makes sense as an auxiliary piece that it's meant to be unassuming, and it 100% succeeds. I can't explain why I love the Oxbot, other than like the mule and the Pathfinder. They just seem to be like dependable, and like a squad would name him and look after him and slag it off when it breaks. It's also just a neat design space for a warband that isn't a warband. And I'm tempted to try out a solo escort sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher and his Oxbot. Also, if you're wondering, am I that mad with robots in my real life? A little bit, yes. I have a robot Hoover who I've named Mortimer. I know. Who gets complained at, yelled at, and praised like any other member of my household. Please, Corvus Belly, just give me more Oxbots. But in the meantime, if you want some free Oxbot models, go to Freedom from Marty's My Minery Factory and download his free Oxbots. They're really great, and I want 10 of them. So, like, the number one could have been Oxbots, but no, I wanted a real REM, so I'm going to go for the Bulleteer. Which is a little odd even to me, because you look at the stats and then have one or two reactions. It's either, man, this is a discount Vostok, or, this is an incredibly cheap, fast, and hard to hit assault piece. And for me, it's the latter. I dig the stats. BS12, min-6, only one armour, but it's 6'4" and a repeater, which means my military orders can project hacking into the midfield very quickly. Then you have the weapon choices. The main downside of the Vostok is burst, but here you can get a burst 4 Spitfire over a damage 16 Mark 12, or you can have a heavy shotgun in the bot instead. What's good about the Spitfire profile is that you're basically always going to have marksmanship on it for an effective ballistic skills 15 in the midfield with min-6. Which is rough to deal with on the Vostok, and it's only a little easier with the Bulleteer. He's also 23 points for that Spitfire, which is neat and cheap, but that heavy shotgun is lethal as it's a fast min-6 shotgun. You can't really dodge with the Bulleteer, so you gotta hope you get up there without getting shot, as this is essentially a smokeless warband. It's not as good at warbanding as the Peacemaker thanks to forward deployment +8 and the Oxbot, but that is generally considered Pano's go-to warband with its little hunter-killer bot. If your opponent was to say move a tag into the midfield and it doesn't have a good 0 to 16 inch defense, then it can very quickly be taken out by 2 shots with damage 15 and AP, if need be, that shot ignoring cover. If they lack close range weapons entirely like the Avatar, Cutter, Xenodron, etc., it very much will end poorly for them. What's even better is that it can harass in military orders, which was like a third of the major fireteam changes I wanted to see in the fireteam update, alongside core linking Teutonic Knights and a Soldat Harris. This now means we have a burst 5 Spitfire on min-6 that can tangle with a surprising amount of things, and it's not a very costly Harris. Cheapest is like 49 points, and you want the engineer with him, so really that goes up to 53 points, which is so cheap. Downside, we have a pocket engineer with whip 12, but the remote is rem press. She is liable to get the bulletier back up thanks to that rem press, meaning that this little Harris can be kind of tough to deal with. Just for math's sake, if you catch a core linked but not pure missile launcher heavy infantry, so ballistic skill 14 with cover and arm 4, in your +3 and their 0 range, you're liable for a 69% chance to do a wound to them, and that's with that marksman buff and a Harris. You don't want to waste your Harris on them, that's fine. It's also a great solo piece, or you can duo it in the Knight fire teams, and importantly, it can form that fire team as well. Most of our cheeky Knights like the Santiago, Joan and Justice live here, but also Defrenzen and Kyle as well. My two favourite combinations for similar yet different reasons are Joan plus the Bulletier, or the Santiago killer hacking device plus the Bulletier. So the Joan duo first. Well, first, it's cheap and it's a link, so Joan won't frenzy, but what's the exact makeup of this duo? Well, I don't really know, to be honest. Either work pretty well, as you can use the Spitfire Bulletier with marksmanship to clear longer range pieces while Joan runs up and slaps in close combat. Or you can take Spitfire Joan to do the shooting and the heavy shotgun Bulletier to screen for Joan and then suicide it when needed. You do need to watch out for hackers, but you kind of always did in military orders. If you go with Santiago instead of Joan with the Bulletier Spitfire, this means the Bulletier can push forward and shoot things while the Santiago effortlessly pushes buttons, or you can push it even further and use it as a repeater to extend the Santiago's killer hacking device further and basically stage dive him and brain blast another hacker. This effectively doubles the Santiago's hacking area for maybe the chance of getting hacked easier. But if you pair this with the 6 Sins hacker though, you are dancing, since another hacker could Baja blast your Santiago or isolate it or something, but then it's going to eat a good few AROs in return, even if it has stealth. So the Bulletier has some great fireteam options in military orders, and that's a major reason I love it. It's just a fun piece. Finally, let's talk about the design and why I picked it over the Vostok for number 1, because it was really close. The Bulletier keeps that Pan-Oceanian design, although it doesn't really show its min-6, but that's fine, and its leg armour shows that it has some armour compared to the drone bots. This sculpt could do with a rework to make it look more new like the drone bots, and maybe even a little more like the Vostok, because it's still pretty good. I really dig the 2 little arms it's got with its guns, but I'm not entirely sure why it isn't +1 burst with those kind of dual guns. It could be its Paris CCW, I guess. Either way, it could be easily updated to modern Pano standards. So why this over the Vostok? Well, I just love Pano, and simply I dig how cheap the model is to take in a list. It's one of those ones where I have a weird attachment to the stats and the concept, then the model. Honestly, to pick between the Vostok and the Bulletier is tough, because it's 2 different yet very similar units, and I simply like the Bulletier just that little bit more. So I mean, that was a video where I gushed about robots for some amount of time. I hope you enjoyed the video and you yourself now have a new robot to care for and bring in all your lists. If you somehow enjoyed my rambling, then please remember to like and subscribe, and thank you so very much for watching.